When we see this kind of profound shutting down of the transportation sector, so much of industry and the broader economy, that does indicate that a lot of critical pollutants are dropping in their concentrations on the order of 30%, say, in some major cities. So we see the air quality rapidly improving in those places. That's a quick, if potentially temporary, response.
Are there specific areas where we have seen marked reductions in the amount of greenhouse gases that are being output as the pandemic has worsened?
Within a week or so of the Bay Area in California, for example, going under a lot of these restrictions, air quality improving by 30% or so. So these are significant. We have seen what look like reductions of 10 to 30% in Northeast China and the industrial part of northern Italy over as short as like a few week periods, as we started to see the virus really hit and some of these restrictions on people's movement and industry going into place. So the numbers are big.
Are there any historical references that give us like a point of comparison?
Thinking about recent recessions, 2008, we have seen reductions in greenhouse gas emissions when the economy slows down a little bit. In the past, it hasn't generally meant reversals, but noticeable declines. And even if we go back earlier and think about the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Eastern European bloc, there you actually did see reductions in greenhouse gas emissions over 5-year periods or even longer associated with this really kind of cataclysmic reduction in economic activity. So ideally, you don't want to see the reductions, with in emissions accompanying these big recessions and economic suffering. I think there's another path, and really the more effective path in terms of moving the dial is moving towards more energy efficiency and less carbon per unit of economic activity. I think another really interesting question is related to how vulnerable we are as a society to shocks. And I do worry that as we think about climate shocks, whether it's simultaneous crop failures in multiple regions, or a year where we have a big fire season in the western US and a big hurricane in the east, are we as resilient as we think we are, even in the areas that don't get directly affected, right? Because we're all connected, and we just sort of assumed that we wouldn't break the bank, whether it's insurance funds or having enough emergency responders. Our hospitals, obviously, we're learning, are more vulnerable than a lot of us realized.
What would you peg the odds at of whether or not this actually leads to a long-term societal change when we do, get to the other side of the pandemic stage of this?
Right now, we're seeing this huge drop in activity and travel, for example. When we get through this terrible crisis, and as you say, we will people replace that lost activity? Are we just going to buy up all the things that we didn't buy during that time? Even if we don't do that, will we just kind of return to the activities of the past? Because really, to reduce our emissions, we need major changes. So then you get to some interesting questions, right? Like, are people maybe after this going to say, hey, video conferencing has improved a lot. Supervisors are more understanding than they used to be. Maybe I won't drive into work 5 days a week in the future. Maybe I won't have to fly to so many conferences, speaking, myself as a climate scientist. If we turn the dial enough, if we as a society respond to this crisis in ways that mean over time in the future, 5, 10, 20 years, we reduce our emissions a lot, that's where it can be decisive. Then we can stabilize the greenhouse gas concentrations, maybe even get to a point where we're pulling more carbon into the atmosphere than we're applying, and we can start to see some climate recovery. That's the hope, but it's going to take ambitious action.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.